Уважаемые коллеги, члены панельной дискуссии.
Dear colleagues, members of the panel, please feel free to enter the podium.
Добрый день, уважаемые.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We start our session, New Challenges in Social Sphere, providing national goals achievement of development of Russian Federation up to 2024 in demography and healthcare. I want to say that probably we all gathered here participating not for the first time in this forum, and last time I had an honor to participate in the section for human capital. Today we have to acknowledge the tendency that Moscow Financial Forum pays special attention to especially social sphere and healthcare separately. Education. These sections are divided, which speaks in favor of the interests and problems which we want to discuss today inter alia using this platform. We agreed with the organizers that we are not focused on big, long speeches, so we are focused on active discussion. If you have any issues, please appoint them, and we will actively discuss it in the end of our section. Today we probably have here financial experts, economy experts, and medicine experts. As people used to say that best economists among medical experts and best medical experts among economists. And the issues which we're about to have are quite stressful. And I want to have a discussion of not only how it should be done, but to speak about what are the problems that can prevent us from implementing those plans and orders which were announced by the President and the programs approved by the government and those money which are appointed by the invest for the implementation of these programs. That's why I'm not going to take too long from you, and let's switch to work. I would like to ask Kotyakov Anton Olegovich, Deputy Minister of Finance of Russian Federation, to make an introduction speech on behalf of the Ministry of Finance and Organizing Committee of the Congress. Thank you, Vitaly. Good day to you, dear colleagues. It happened to be so that we start the second day of our work, and our work is mainly going around the national projects and those priorities which are appointed by the government. Within 12 national projects, we have 8 trillion presupposed. Everybody know that perfectly, and everybody understands it's like kind of settled. And switching into the projects we're planning to discuss, first of all, it refers to demography. Very good positive results we have in the previous 6 years. The main achievements of healthcare is the length of life of 73 years, average life. We can be proud of that, but we have new horizons and new goals which we have within the framework of the order. As for financial provision, I have to say that for implementation of national project as demography and healthcare, we were supposed to use 3 billion rubles, 3 trillion, sorry. I have to say that the discussion of demographic pack was split into 3 parts. First of all, bearing in mind the importance of demographic pack, while the draft law was formed of 2019, 2020, 2021, we submerged many topics in the existing budget cycle. In the existing budget, we presuppose like 2.6 trillion rubles on demographic pack for the upcoming 6 years, and the cycle and horizon of planning within the national project. Still understanding the significant role and quite ambitious goals which are pointed in the order of the President, extra 4 400 billion rubles were added up to 3 trillion, which will be allocated for the dimensions which we are about to discuss and will be the tools to achieve these goals. As for the healthcare, the healthcare situation is a bit different. The total amount of the project amounts to 3 trillion rubles, but for the healthcare, discussion and implementation of national projects, they allocate separately 1,350 billion rubles, 1.355 billion rubles, trillion rubles. Sorry. These are all the resources in a total volume of 8 trillion, and which are allocated for the healthcare. Yesterday, in the end of discussion, I focused the attention of all the panel participants that there is no considering the volumes of national project financing within the extra financing volumes. We have to perfectly alone. We have to understand that the volumes of the resources are mainly concentrated and focused on implementing major infrastructure projects. This is rearrangement of material and technical bases, development of extra premises for healthcare in this case. This is purchasing of contemporary modern medical equipment, system of oncological program, with also presupposed in the program. But we do not have to forget that the major part of this resources is allocated in the existing system, and those who will be allocated for the existing system have to be reconsidered, optimized, and from the point of view of their efficiency and the efficiency of use of it. That's why today's discussion and the goals which we are about to consider as the priorities in the development of the sphere should not consider only the extra allocated money. We have to see what we have already. That's why I suggest that we start our discussion based on changing the approaches on the costs of the sphere regarding both the existing funds and the extra allocated money within the national project. I hope that my colleague speakers will mainly submerge in the essence of the national projects, in the measures which have to serve a tool to achieve the appointed indexes. Thank you. Thank you, Anton Olegovich. Dear colleagues, we're all aware that our country is huge. Country composed of various subjects of federation which are different, they are remote, they are different from point of view of climate, from geography. That's why they are very hard to put into equation, and that's always a problem in front of Russian Federation. Still, the implementation of the goals cannot be solved on federal level. It will always be a joint consensual process which has to be developed between the federation and the subjects of federation on the federal level and on regional level as well. The upper chamber of the regions of the Federal Assembly is the chamber which always has to listen thoroughly to the problems which these subjects of federation have. That's why I'd like to give the floor to Grushnyan Viktor Evgenievich, Deputy Chair of the Federal Council of the Russian Federation, to say a few words about how the upper chamber of Russian Parliament sees the implementation of the goals and the projects which are approved. Thank you indeed. I'm really glad that I came to a social section, because for me it's not quite a typical thing. For me, typical is taxes, inter-budget relations, etc. But I considered it necessary, and that is why. Let me tell you why. Very often in the mass media and from the heads of big entities, we see the same number which is referring to national projects is 8 trillion rubles. I absolutely don't understand what this number is referring to and what it is all about, because I don't think that there are some specific 8 trillion on which the national projects are being built and they have to achieve some kind of goal. I think the last announcement regarding the existence of the basis, budget basis, and it all is going to work for the national projects. It will be divided between national projects and will be working for the benefit of the national projects. And judging by the numbers, they are more or less, if they're not bigger than 8 trillion, it will be in 6 years, which is so widely spoken today. Once more, I'd like to remind that the President said it will be added to implement the national projects. What we have already, the sum is much bigger. Plus, there will be 8 trillion rubles. That's the first point. The second point, when we were considering the beginning of the budget process in the region, you know that today, federal budget process is in its peak. A budget commission has passed on the 20th of September. There will be the governmental commission, and then the draft will be introduced to the State Duma on the 1st of October. And in the regions, the budget process has already started to implement, to build the budgets of the 1920-21 years, 2021. And what is referred to the national projects, they actually don't see it in their place. I try to figure it out. Why I'm saying all that. We now we have to say what can prevent us from doing that. I was trying to find out the basic money of the budget. Are they somehow spread or diverse by national projects? Are there special classification for money in the federal budget referring to the national projects? And I found out that the electronic budget allows for that. We have everything for that, but I saw 3 or 4 lines which are filled already. Maybe it was just a few days ago, maybe the number of these lines multiplied. But for the moment, I can say that the work of the government referring to the classification of the money allocations referring to the national projects is in the very beginning. From the point of view of the essence of the national projects, first of all, it is indeed in the phase of discussion. It is draft. Now we have only passports of national projects, so all the functional saturation of that on the specific events and specific indexes will be submerged in the federal projects, which are part of the national projects, and that's the term for that is the 1st of October. In fact, when I was considering these documents, in all the documents, there was 1st of September, which was quite surprising. Well, in fact, okay, let it be the 1st of October. But you understand that the 1st of October for the regions is no good for the regions already. They have to form their budgets already before that, as for the basis of spreading that. Diversifying. As for the extra money of 8 trillion, you clearly understand that the demographical program and healthcare, performing that in Moscow and within the Sadova Ring Road is just impossible. It's unreal. Here we can fill everybody with money, feed everybody with money, they will live long. But what will be for the country? For the country, regions are the key points where the national projects will be implemented in the regions. And as for their goals, their entities, it will be like 90–95%, and only a small part, like federal entities, refer to very serious goals in the sphere of healthcare. These are probably like proton diagnosis, proton center, and Dmitrov, like federal. Probably it will be like that, but the rest of it will be in the regions. Still, the regions do not see what from the national projects and which regions will be performed and how in the specific actions it will look like. The goals are quite clear, but as for division by the specific events has not been delivered. This information has not been delivered to the regions, and as far as I understand, this goal should be performed before the 1st of October, and I hope that today we are about to get something. In all the meetings, in the government and outside the government, I say absolutely the same thing. Hurry up, hurry up. The regions can get budgets which do not meet what the actual situation for the next year. For us, it's absolutely unacceptable. I always rush the executive power, and I have to say that after that, in response, we have immediate feedback, we have specific dates. I'm quite happy with that, but I would like to stress once more that the productivity of these projects directly depends on the regions, and the regions have to know how do they participate in each and every national project, especially in such important ones as healthcare and demography. The third point, also regional one. Nobody can imagine that the national projects which basically inside the budget, which have extra 8 trillion money to be performed, will be fully financed from original budgets. They definitely will be. I met representatives of many regions, and they say that extra money to what they have already discussed in the profile ministries, what they're planning to add in order to better implement the goals of this or that national project, starting from digital economy, ending up with the project of like healthcare or education. Adding to that, like education and healthcare are the responsibilities of the regions, and the main budget for both healthcare and education is in the regional budgets. So most probably the third component of financing of all national projects is the regional component, and we should never forget about it. Especially for that, I have to say it was agreed with the State Duma and with the Federation Council of the government. The government established specific numbers of co-financing in the regions, co-financing of national projects, which are significantly lower than in inter-budget relations. Significantly lower, but in fact, it speaks only in favor of big differentiation of the regions, because many regions are on federal support, and the serious co-financing can be not quite successful. But in other regions, this possibility exists, and they will co-finance in absolutely, definitely 100%. So in 6 years, the priority is the regional component, regional budget. Let's see what's in the President's order dated the 7th of May. What is said in this order? There's decrease of the death rate from like heart attacks and oncology, reduction of the newborn death, and increase of the quality of living of people. I constantly try to see, when I'm given a passport of the national project, the idea which is in the passport, and it is already the executive view to the ideas which are in the order of the president. For me, they are like natural. And, you know, you're aware about the 8 projects which are in the national plan. I will not get too deep into the structures. I'm quite well prepared for that. I didn't just come from, I have it systematized and prepared, and in each and every component, including the digital one of the national project of the healthcare, I hope it will be discussed, because with our territories, we are the biggest country in the world, and we have to admit that. And our transport availability is that without switching into digital ways and remote diagnosis, there is no living. That's an absolutely separate story, and I could have speak for quite long. Still, going back to the idea which the moderator initiated, what can ruin the situation? What can prevent us from achieving that? I have quite an interesting thing in my head when I was looking through the passport and the projects. You know, oncology, I agree. Many people suffer from that. But in order to achieve demographic goals, it is not the project which can be a solution for that. Like heart attacks, it's closer, it's bigger, but it's still not a way out. And the solution which I feel like every day, I feel in the region which I represent, is Rostov region. I feel, regardless of having serious attention to healthcare, I feel constantly, while meeting people, is not the primary medical assistance, but ambulance, rapid medical assistance. Neither a single word is said in all the prepared documents. I said nothing, so nothing about the ambulances, because it's a regional thing, sorry, but a national project, I'm sorry. Ambulance is the responsibility of regional authorities, definitely municipal ones, regional ones. But I beg your pardon, the national project is a project for the whole country. How it could have been missed that we have to increase the technical capacities of ambulance, and their typical saturation with doctors and the number of jobs with doctors is not better than in the primary medical personnel. We have a special personnel project. We have to involve more doctors to perform their duties in the initial medical link, so to say. But nothing is said about ambulance. The problems are the same. Rotation of personnel is absolutely the same because it's quite a complicated and hard work. They're working day and night. And for several times we were not happy with how many people behave towards separate doctors working on the ambulances separate. It is not mentioned anywhere. That's a disadvantage, and it will not lead to the collapse of a national project. It will definitely not lead, if we think about it and reflect this problem in a national project. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the intervention. Emergency aid is something that is lagging behind across the world because everybody wants to develop top-notch technology areas and not the everyday ambulance work. So this is the issue that is quite difficult to resolve, and that's something that obtains for the whole world. Today, when we are speaking about the national projects, we know where they will be implemented, who is going to implement them, how they would be monitored, and what would be the cooperation between the federal and the regional authorities. Not all of us have a clear picture of how all of this is going to function. Therefore, I would like now to give the floor to the next speaker, who is dealing closely with improving technological staffing of our hospitals. Everything that we've been discussing just right now is possible only because there is the good infrastructure that was built in the previous years. The Ministry of Health has done a great job to make this work, to make it more comprehensive, and that what enables us to discuss any further improvements. Let's now touch upon an issue that might not be directly linked. I would like to speak about digital technologies. We all are looking forward to some breakthroughs in biological medicine. We want to have new equipment. We are thinking about new labs. But it seems that quite often we do not fully grasp the importance of one more issue. All the achievements in various scientific areas, genetics, microbiology, they all were made possible by achievements in industries. But what is more important, they're based on the digital capacities. Because all of these areas draw upon big data. healthcare is becoming more and more technically sophisticated. So that's something that should be guaranteed by the more cheap processing of data. There are various aspects here: the development of the infrastructure, of networks. That all is the foundation. However, we should always keep an eye on all recent developments that make the use of big data possible. That process is the foundation that would make us able to make this big leap, so that there is the good potential for the investment yields. We need to understand what would be achieved through the development of technologies. Right now, I think we do see some good ground for development. We have a lot of priorities as regards artificial intelligence, informatics, and big data use. We have a lot of cutting-edge achievements that would be able to ensure our leadership in this area. We believe that that could provide the ground. That was the use of the good legal basis would bring about the breakthrough. Thank you so much, Sergey. I haven't dwelled upon technologies, and I'd like to once again point out that we need to know what exactly we're innovated is. As for the digital development, there is the special fund. Over 1 trillion rubles will be invested into digital infrastructure. How does that look according to areas distribution? Infrastructure, high-speed internet in schools, healthcare, system equipment, all of that is taken care of in the digital economy project. As for specific areas, those are covered in the national projects. Communications channels. For instance, if they go for the healthcare area, out of this 3 trillion rubles, 5 billion rubles will go to automatization of healthcare system. What we want to do there is to establish the information system there will be accessible healthcare centers in rural areas. To build them, we need to have infrastructure development. The next area is to create the data bank where one could store all the tests results. so that they would be accessible from every hospital. So people won't have to take their X-rays or test results with them to a hospital. Within the program of automatization that is underway today, the distribution of resources is one of the crucial areas. A couple more words about the budget spending classification. There is an important indicator there. When we look at the budget spending structure, that will make us able to understand what particular development project they were spent on. So there will be specific letter indicators. All of these indicators would apply to the whole budget structure. Well, I never doubted the finance ministry capacities, but what I was worried about is that there should be the areas that are filled in by different ministries and departments. And what I said, that some of the areas have not yet been filled in. Right. Of course, especially the social area. Dear colleagues, we all have seen the agreement established. Congratulations on that. Now we could move on. We're speaking about new challenges in demography and healthcare. We seem to discuss healthcare more, and it seems somehow closer to everyone. But the goals 2024 include the issue of demography. Demographics is a scientific area that has its own laws. Our potential for influencing demography are quite limited. We all want to change the situation. How to do that? We'll ask Mr. Yentov, the representative of the World Bank. Thank you so much. It's a great honor for me to address this forum and this high panel. There are people who are great experts, the great financiers, they know well the institutions. I'd like to go to two questions. Why do we set this particular targets for demographics? Can they be achieved? Can we draw on the experience of other countries? Russia is not an exclusion. A lot of countries are facing similar demographic problems and healthcare problems. There is some good expertise that we can draw upon. The tasks that are set forth are realistic, but how can they be achieved? I prepared the presentation, the PowerPoint. So there will be a couple of slides where you'll see the important indicators that would serve as an illustration to the ideas that I express. The tasks that are set forth are important, and they can be achieved. When we are speaking about the importance of demography, we see that the Russian population is not the only one that is getting old. That is a serious threat to the economy. We know that there are two trends. One, the birth rate is going down. People want to have more quality and less quantity. They are aiming at developing fully the talents of their kids, so they have less kids, they have fewer kids. That is quite logical. How can this challenge be addressed? How can we mitigate the consequences? Here you can see an interesting picture that is from the report on East Asia and the Pacific. Get older and prosper. Live long and prosper. That's the slogan. You know that getting old is something that is viewed as a sad thing in Russia. Someone said that we all want to live longer, but nobody wants to get old. I think this is precisely where we need to look for the answer to address the challenges that we are facing. What should be done? If nothing is done, then the number of able-bodied population will drop substantially. If nothing changes in the labor market, there might be serious problems for the economy. The picture that you see on the slide demonstrates that Russia is precisely in the middle of the list of the countries that are facing demographic problems. There are countries with the growing population who is the people are getting older, so the number of people will be older than 65 will increase. The first thing that we could do to make less the burden for the younger population, we need to increase the birth rate. That's the first answer that pops into my mind. There are such attempts to do that. All the developed countries in the world are setting demographic goals as a priority. That's the first thing that you think about doing when more and more people in the country are not able to work anymore and they depend on the younger population. In Russia, there was a research carried out in 2007. That was the first time when the demographic situation has become the target for the government. What we discovered, that a lot of families have less than one or only one kid. The target that we set was to overcome the obstacles that the families are facing if they want to have more kids. If we compare the situation to other developed countries that have been facing demographic problems for a number of years, so we compare them to France and to Germany. In Germany, the situation has been improving recently as well. So the things that they do and how Russia is different. In Russia, women employment is quite low. They cannot easily find jobs after giving birth to a child. The child care system is underdeveloped. So these are the three target areas that we could work upon to improve the situation. Of course, that is not sufficient. Those benefits that mothers receive are important, But does that anyhow help us to improve the birth rate? It's clear that when jobs are precarious, having a child becomes a burden. How could that load be alleviated? If we look at the situation in Russia, we can see that the risk for families with kids has been increasing. To have over 2 kids would make it more difficult for the families. That's why they hesitate to have more kids.
Демография.
The project of demography includes the necessary component of social protection, and it is closely related to the national priority of reducing poverty, which was announced by President, like twice as much. This must be done, but there is no doing that without reducing the share of the families with children who are below the line of poverty. That's a complex task, but it can be implemented. The next schedule will give us a chance to see realistically what can be achieved, what factors work here. That's the Organization for Economic Development research, which was held like 15 years ago, and it reflected the situation in the countries 15 years ago. The digits, the indexes, and show what was the birth rate in that countries at that time. Then there was modeling. What can be done in these countries to increase the birth rate? We can increase availability of services or to reduce some difficulties with children, referring to the levels of the situation in the trade market, labor market. These are the difficulties with the birth rate. And countries do differ strongly. What are the effects from these measures that can be observed there? On one hand, in one country like Germany, for example, we can see that generally the system was so beneficial for the families with children, both taxation, reduction, and access to early birth and all this stuff. And the birth rate was low. In other countries, we could see a bigger effect. In Portugal, for example, almost 1.5 per 50% can be the level of birth rate could be increased. Now, 15 years after, we can see what happened in these countries, and we will see that in France, for example, the growth of the birth rate is almost absolutely correlates with what was predicted in this research. Now, the level exceeds 2. Coefficient is over 2. In Germany, regardless of quite pessimistic forecast, managed to increase it by 1.6. In other countries where nothing was done, like for example Portugal, were big possibilities, opportunities to increase this birth rate, and now it's 1.3, one of the lowest indexes in the world, which shows that the goals are not put, the problems are not solved, and the Germans experienced that if you insist too much, insist enough, you can solve the task. So the goals are quite complicated, but quite achievable in this perspective and from the provision of this experience. So let us see now the next component, which we discuss a lot. In fact, we can increase the birth rate, but here the possibilities are limited, and this, that. Moment the economy will definitely face the situation with growth of number of people, elderly people. And these are the attempts to for healthy elderly lifestyle, active elderly lifestyle. And here the role of healthcare is very big, and the national priorities which are put in front of us, they face the diagnosis which we have, and it's not about me. It's not my business to discuss it. Bear in mind there are experts from the healthcare here.
Учитывать и какие вызовы стоят перед.
Still, there can be observations. What are the challenges in front of Russia? Everybody is perfectly aware of the problems with the length of life, and the active life is not that long in Russia. According to the last data, was in the 100th place in the world, judging by this index, and we still have huge potential here. Big room for development. Now, I can say that other countries were trying to solve similar problems, like indexes of the length of life and active life, and Finland were worse than now in Russia, but still sustainable goals, which were propaganda of healthy lifestyle, increasing the availability of ambulances was really important. A really important component of the strategy of on the national level, which was implemented there. So increase in the protocols of curing like heart and vein problems. Now Finland has one of the longest average life in the world. So now I have to say that being healthy for quite long is really cool, but there is a problem to increase that. But many things happen before people cross this line of 60 years, 55 years, 65 years, and the difference from country to country. Here on our schedule, it will be to the left. You can see the disperse of countries. We are now making a project on human capital where we are trying to see various indexes of human capital in different countries of the world, depending on their level of income, level of development. On this schedule, you can see the share of the population, a total by both men and women, from 15 years to 60. We should make it to 60. Russia is in red. Here you can see that it's next to Kazakhstan. The indexes are not quite positive. Only 15 people make it to 60. From those who made it till 15, 85% do it. That's a low index compared to many African countries, and generally this is an index which something has to be done about. Both who deal with healthcare, various diagnoses, and the fact that in Russia the death rate from road accidents is extremely higher than in Europe, and it's a serious problem without solving which we can progress in prolonging life and to give people a chance to make it to the pre-pension age. On the other part of a schedule, you can see the death rate. On the index is a green one is oncology, which we're speaking about here. The blue is heart attacks. We have big reserves to make the situation better and to provide for people not dying from these types of diseases, and it's referred to early diagnosis and availability of medical assistance, and what is really important, responsibility. Now here in Russia, people very often don't take responsibility for their own health. It's like paternalist attitude. The state is responsible for me, it has to provide me with everything, it has to take care of my health. And it's quite a popular idea, and this positive picture about what is active, long life, long living, is directly connected to the situation when people will take responsibility for their own health and to treat it responsibly. That is basically what I wanted to say. Once more, that's an overview which proves that the goals from the May orders are critically important and meet those problems and goals which the country faces. And implementation of these goals is an opportunity, and it's in your hand how we can provide to the maximum, both provided financially and technically. Thank you, Ruslan Georgievich. Thank you separately for nevertheless appointing the problem of the national health care Still, there is not much optimism after your speech, apart from that we're not worse than the others. And as for putting goals in front of us and easily achieved, after your speech, we feel like it's hard to achieve. Still, when we're speaking about the length of life of active elderly people and people who are in the working age, these are the people who are paying money. The taxes are the money for the healthcare. In this regard, we say that increasing the health level of the active population gives extra support for the healthcare. Healthcare is growing. It's almost there is no resisting it. It brings to destabilization of the financial system. It brings to financial instability. That's why it happens. So that, on one hand, by increasing the health, we increase the length of life, which will be a burden for the working population. Nevertheless, increasing the health, we can speak about the healthier population pays more taxes, and being healthier is better trained, is becoming more efficient, and is a certain investment in the economy. So it's like has its pros and cons. At the same time, in all the countries worldwide, healthcare is growing. It's hard to limit it somehow. And we are now facing the fact that we'll never have enough money, regardless of how much we allocate, no matter how expensive we are, to satisfy social sphere and to satisfy the healthcare system. In this context, we have a question: how socially responsible business, how major companies can be involved in the case, in the situation. For 8 to 10 years, we discussed the PPP actively. Still, it is like standing in the same position. Many discussions in various platforms, whether the public and private projects are introduced, whether they are enough or not. I'd like to give the floor to Alashkevich Mikhail Yurievich, Vice President of Age and Function of KK Внешэкономбанк, with the topic allocating of non-budget funds for national projects. I know that Внешэкономбанк is one of the organizations which has one of the biggest experience in getting involved into PPP. Thank you, Gennady Vladimirovich. You have just said that money can be not enough for performing that, and I'm for the second day in this forum, and I'm getting more and more convinced that it's a forum of big digits, big numbers. Today I attended the section on inter-budget relations. Leonid Vladimirovich Gornin said that 8 trillion will be allocated for implementation of national projects, like national projects, primarily. Yesterday we heard that 1 trillion will be for education and culture, almost a trillion, like 3 trillion for demography, 3 for health care. The numbers are quite impressive, but still I'd like to support Evgeny Viktorovich. We have a very respectful basis. We have quite a... With my colleagues, when we were considering the materials of the forum and while getting ready to the forum, every year 18.5 trillion rubles allocated for the social sphere and all the level. This is a colossal, gargantuan volume, and it is always not enough. That's why budget money, money not from the budget, is also important. And reducing the passports of the national projects with one body of, we were discussing it with one authority, and we asked, our colleagues asked, why Внешэкономбанк is participating there. What's the interest? We say, like, there is out-of-budget source which we want to allocate, which we want to involve in social sphere to provide for quality of services and the quality of health, which is provided within the framework of healthcare. And the colleague from the ministry said, you know, in our project we have only budget money. So we want to have both kinds of money in the project. That's why I'd like to give a floor, say a few words about that. That's why thank you for bringing me to this speech. Today I'm going to speak more about demography project. Demography project, indeed, there is a big number of events with about 3 trillion rubles supposed to be used there. That's a mother's capital for support the childhood and motherhood, which stimulates the birth rate and work with family, and etc. And so on and so forth. And there is a federal project within this framework, which is called Elder Generation. We should not forget that demography is also working with the elderly people and prolongation of life cycle. If we see the main index, it's development of centers of providing services to elderly people. Development of the centers, 33 billion rubles are implemented to be used there, planned to be used there. There will be a few thousands of extra people who will have a chance to benefit by using these services, and we have to understand that this investment of budget money will be a burden for the budget and the subject for maintenance of this property. And the subjects are the main beneficiaries of the national projects, but the subjects will co-finance implementation of all our initiatives. So already now, working with subjects in like a pilot mode, we thought about how we can increase efficiency of such kind of events, whether the model is efficient, and we now perfectly realize that today we have a problem with finding demand in for social support. The applying principle is not used by many people because not all are informed about what services are provided. There are problems with making it typical with the routine of the recipients of social services. We're speaking about this as like a consequence. There's such kind of patients who do not need medical service but occupy places in hospitals, which are the consequence of incorrect routing in the social sphere. So today, with our partners, with CE, we're trying to, with administrations of the subjects of federations, we're trying to implement these pilot projects. One of these projects in the Volgograd region was implemented. This is a project where correct routing of social assistance recipients is the core. And we see as a result, number of them is growing. And we are working on the indexes, how we can measure the result of these projects. But one of the indexes can be the reduction in a number of calling to the ambulance for the elderly people who are very often calling them not due to medical services, but just because they need some kind of other assistance, which have very often nothing to do with the medical assistance. This project, the uniqueness of this project is that it is fully implemented by private initiatives. In such projects, in fact, 4 key actors participate there. There's a state which puts a goal here. It is the increase in routing of the kind of social assistance. This is the agent, the state, represented by the Institute of Development. In our case, together with the CU, we implement this goal of the government's agent of the public authorities, an assessment of the effects which we have to achieve both financially, economically, and socially. We help to structure the projects. We are being a Sherpa of state in this segment. Here we get an investor who is ready to invest in this project, his own money, in order to implement this correct model of routine, and the provider of services who is a non-state organization who understands how it should be done. As a rule, projects appear when the state does not know how to solve this problem, and it turns to private business. Abroad, it's quite a common practice, but in Russia, these projects are not practical yet, and we're trying to implement them for the moment. What is the interest of investor, you might ask? What is the payback, and whether it's just charity? The interest of investor is just in case of implementation of this model, Then the framework of economy of budget services, by providing the services, we have social and economic effect for the subject, and this payback is received from the state, but only in case of achieving this effect in 3 or 5 years. These projects, they are called social input bonds. We call social influence projects. These are quite local projects aimed at changing the model and changing the existing system and the position, which later can be scaled to the bigger volumes of providing services, and so on and so forth. These projects, we plan to do it together with the Ministry of Finance. We plan the experiments in a number of subjects of the Russian Federation. We plan to do it not only in social sphere, but in other segments. What I would like to say, these are not big projects, but really important one. And here, Внешэкономбанк is playing a role of an agent of government. But there are major scale projects which require allocation of more money.
I see that there are some people in the audience, our colleagues with whom we are working on this project. That concerns the work with the older population, 41 billion rubles is set forth in the budget to build the residential houses for older people. Is it interesting for the private companies to invest in these programs? And could our bank also invest there? Well, so far it hasn't been finalized. We estimate that up to 4 million rubles could be allocated to build only one such center. The average amount that would be spent on a single person would be up to 1,500 rubles. More money could be spent if there are some particular services provided. But covering only those who stay there for free, we could say that this model could be still profitable for the investors in the term of 20-25 years. Definitely, this project could not be established and carried out without the help from the state. Maybe there should be the subsidized interest rate so that we could give out loans to investors in this area. That would be quite crucial to make this scheme work. So we are going back, we are trying to abandon the retirement centers and to provide better services for older population. We want to also provide some additional services to the clients of the centers. Within the national projects framework, we have set the following target: that staying in this centers should be as comfortable for the people as staying home. When we look at the numbers, at the figures, you can see that throughout the whole implementation period, only 3,000 people got services from the centers. We're going to increase the number. We'd also like to attract new investments there. So I suggest that we get down to doing the work. Could I ask a question on this, the follow-up question? Bank, is it a bank that should invest in the social state development? Because it seems that your scheme has to do something with the welfare state. Where is the place of your bank in this formula? A couple of words. You said that our bank is a bank. That's true. But it is more of a state cooperation at the same time. So it seems that making profits is not so important to you. Well, in a way, because development is a very peculiar area. But we can play two roles here. One would be the leadership in implementation of the projects. We would provide expertise and help other investors to achieve the goals that we set forth. The other role is that the one of the investor that would use the state budget and loans. We would also provide special products that other banks are not able to provide. So it's difficult to overestimate the role of Bank. Dear colleagues, we have made a great headway already, and now we are getting closer to the Ministry of Health. We know that the ministry has some important objectives to achieve. It seems almost impossible, but we know that they will be able to make it. Now I'm giving the floor to the next speaker, Yekaterina Kokorina. Hello, everyone. Dear participants, today is a good day and a sunny day. That's a big event for organizers and for the participants. But not only, the Health Ministry has something to celebrate. We have the development plan approved for the Health Ministry. We elaborated special indicators. We have prepared and adopted the list of events and special measures. Not only the Health Ministry worked on this, but the Russian regions. There are a lot of representatives from the constituent entities of the Russian Federation. We have set forth 8 federal projects, and they are ready to be implemented on the ground. The work with the regions has been quite fruitful, and everybody is engaged. National goals are quite ambitious for the goals that we set for 2024. First is sustainable growth of the population. A second, increase of life expectancy. The Health Ministry is taking part in 2 projects. Healthcare and demographics are the 2 federal projects that we are engaged in. I'm not going to cover in detail the indicators that we are going to use. accessibility of healthcare services and increase of birth rate, those are the most important ones. Because without that, nothing could be done. National projects include 4 objectives that could be assessed through 11 indicators. They're quite ambitious, and we have set targets for the regions that are part of this program. So we're going to decrease child mortality rates, infant mortality rates, we'll also want to increase life expectancy. So here you can see the key demographic indicators. Without the help of our regions, we would not be able to implement this program. Taking into account the projected indicators, we are now going to improve them and to achieve the goals set forth by the President. Please look at the graph. Maybe you remember the 90s. The birth rate fell down, mortality rate increased. In 2016, we got over the crisis. Now, in the blue, you see the birth rate, and this is the data from Rosstat. Unfortunately, birth rate is going down. Mortality rate in the best case scenario is going down, but the pessimistic scenarios see the mortality rates going up. The goals that are set forth by the President are not something that corresponds to our forecast. Because what we need to do is to have 10 to 9 deaths for 1,000 people. Unfortunately, that is very difficult. All the federal projects include this indicator. We know very well that our regions are bringing down the cardiovascular death cases, but that doesn't anyhow affect overall mortality rate. That's why we decided to work on other areas in the regions. There will be specific indicators for the age. Of course, that's not that easy because not everybody agrees to comply with the indicators and targets that we suggest. The regions want to re-equip hospitals, but their indicators are not very good. The figures that they show will never bring us close to the goals that the President set forth in the Development Goals 2024. You know well what the federal projects are: cardiovascular, cancer, the first aid, and children healthcare. These are 4 main federal projects. If there is the situation when hospitals are understaffed, it would be very difficult to achieve the goals. In case we fail to develop the new healthcare centers, we'll not be able to obtain the results that we need. Development of the medical services export is another important area. All the regions, except 6, are taking part in the last area that I just mentioned, the export of medical services. They cooperate with the Bank of Russia, with other organizations. All of these goals are rather ambitious. Here, in particular, the investment in healthcare should be increased fourfold, and that should be connected to the growth of medical services export. We are trying to involve PPPs and cooperation with the state. As for the emergency aid, some of the colleagues have raised the issue of emergency aid and ambulance services. There is the project on aviation, emergency healthcare aviation. The federal projects cannot be restricted to some very particular areas. If we know that there is a problem in a region, we'll try to put it into the federal project. Therefore, if there is a problem in the region, if there is the issue of particular concern, it is going to be reflected in the federal project. As for support to the older people, there is, for instance, one interesting measure, and I hope that the Ministry of Finance will render its assistance. Mortality rates for older population is quite high. Their contribution to mortality rate is 76%. In Russia, overall, from 25 to 27 or 30% are the people who are older than their retirement age. That's why there is, of course, a problem. What are the causes for mortality? There are respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases. That's why we wanted to introduce the following measure. We also ask for the Ministry's Finance assistance. There should be special vaccines for people who are older than 65. Yes, that's exactly what has been reflected. Some things might change, but that's what we have already prepared for. Life expectancy is another important indicator. If the mortality rate among older population is not brought down, we'll never reach the indicator set forth for the life expectancy. Mortality of men who are older than 65 is 3.5 times higher. What the reason is? I think we have decided on we have already resolved that. I thought we have the answers. Well, let me round up. As regards the demographics project, what's most important is the healthy lifestyle. If there are any other questions, I'd be really glad to take them. Right now, we are discussing the pension reform draft. The life expectancy should be related to the lifestyle. It seems it's very clear that, for instance, if somebody is lonely, if people live alone, their mortality rates go up. Well, poor man. The last address today is Mr. Potapov. He's an expert in finance. We do not want him to speak about special medical products that they elaborate, but we need him to speak about the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleagues. As it has been said, yes, indeed, I represent the pharmaceutical industry, but my education is economical and mathematical. Can you hear me? That's fine. It has been a pleasure to participate today in the discussion, because the only issue we're discussing is like what pharmaceutical businesses working today. We're speaking about assessment, about efficiency of financing. We're speaking about demography, because all these moments influence what pharmaceutical companies involved in and the industry as a whole. But the main important thing is, among what we were discussing, is that all we want citizens to live long and in high quality standards. I think the high quality standards is not a new thing, but special emphasis is made today on that aspect. Access to technologies, access to medical assistance, taking care of your health, making people take care of their health, having special diagnosis is always influencing this quality of lifestyle of our population in the future. Today I wanted to say a few words about innovations, inter alia, because the world today is very different from what we'll have tomorrow, and there is no speaking about creating modern society if we don't pay any attention to innovations. Innovations at the same time carry big risks from the point of view of financial costs, undoubtedly, and undoubtedly innovations can change the approaches we use today, which brings extra risks to the management systems and assessment of quality efficiency of medical services which we have today are also influenced. The assessment from volumes to quality, efficiency of medical personnel is a very good tendency. Still, if we can see one specific oncological program which is being developed, we will understand that those technologies and those remedies are used in curing oncology are very expensive. But we have two levels of financing. One level of financing is federal, the second one is financed by the subjects of federation. And very often, when a person gets very good therapy, stationary, after that is going to his region where he has to continue with his medical procedures. There are no guarantees for continuity in the medical services at the moment, unfortunately. And of course, that's a huge problem for a patient and a very big risk for his health, like interrupted medical assistance. At the same time, these are financial risks for the states as well, because what has already been done, those enormous money which was spent can be absolutely crossed out in the link. What was said by the Ministry of Healthcare when she was speaking about continuing the remedy therapy after the hospital medical service is very important for us to understand how we can provide a system of access to the remedies in both segments of medical assistance in order to have full effect for medical assistance to a specific patient, which we assisted already. So it's really important. How can we do it? There's a number of ways: through insurance company, through broadening responsibilities of firms, and so on and so forth. But to our mind, if we keep paying attention to oncology and spend 200, 300 billions of rubles per annum, but we don't do it till the very end, that's a big risk for the big burden for the state, and there's a question why we're doing that. So we need a complex assessment of medicines and the technology. How can we understand which of the remedies, which of the therapies is the most efficient and so economically efficient? It's impossible to do it, and it's impossible to forecast the situation. That's why in 2014, in legislation, it was inscribed that this idea, like complex assessment, appeared in the legislation. We have to continue developing that. I say once more, that's the only option when the state and the pharmaceutical company can assess the decision, the solution, how effective it is, and how better it is than all the other solutions we had till this moment. It is impossible. And we switch from complex assessment to innovations. We have new products, we have new technologies. How can we understand that it is better, what it gives to the society? How can we assess a year of extra life? How can we assess of active extra life, like preservation of fertility of patients, etc.? It's all related to the innovative technologies which are today being developed worldwide, and it is all related to what we're speaking about. We want our population to have a healthy lifestyle and to be capable of active living, active working, taking care of their children, giving birth to new ones, etc. These things are all interconnected, and I do hope that this idea of complex assessment will keep developing. We need it badly. We need it both for the finance, for the society as it is. Going a little bit back to the web, GKChP. The first Mr. Shuvalov gave suggestions on risk-sharing programs, and it has never came to a logical end because there was a number of problems. Maybe because it is small, but when they are numerous, the effect is quite high. All the new remedies, all the innovative technologies, they are followed by certain risk. We know practice, we know what the effect will be on this after that remedies. So what is the way out of that? We have to share responsibility between those who pay and who invented something and suggest something. This is risk sharing. Speaking in English terms, it is important. First of all, because we have an opportunity to test something. Secondly, we have a chance to assess it. And we should never forget, every attempt of using innovative technologies is an investment in the idea, in the ideas, in the country, in the intellectual component of the country. I think all the financial experts perfectly realize that without them, no money can help. Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrei Yurich. Dear colleagues, we have a few minutes for Q&A session. Please, you have the floor, and please don't forget to introduce yourself. Hello, dear colleagues. Yakov Tibinkov, Minkomsvязь, Russia. We participated in the preparation of the passport of the projects in IT from the above-mentioned 105 billion rubles. As far as I remember, mainly it refers to, so to say, basic informatization, but I will reveal a small secret. They appealed for a greater volume of financing, and in that part of application there were events on financing the breakthrough, innovative, cutting-edge in IT programs in healthcare, and we came to a common ground that these platforms would be more reasonable to finance from non-budget sources. And recently in Russia, there was a legislative initiative accepted that allows to finance IT system according to that model. On the other hand, when we started to discuss it closely with the Ministry of Healthcare, one of the significant barriers of attractive finances is access to data. Your colleagues mentioned the artificial intellect, big, massive data processing system, and there is a problem of access to fine access to data. They are needed for analysis, systematic approach to that. The system of support will help to propose the best diagnosis, and in this regard, I have a question to Evgeny Bushmin and to Ekaterina, whether this problem is discussed and what approaches can be to this sensitive sphere. I generally can, unfortunately, Rumentsov Sergei left. You know, when he started his speech, he said that in order to make a step forward, you have to step on a stair. Without stepping on this first stair, you should not step on the second one. And I have to say the similar thing. We are actively monitoring the movement of the medicine before creating the basic systems of informatization. It could have been impossible, just impossible. There is a certain basis wherefrom we can move to this or that direction. Of course, I regret that the Ministry of Healthcare will not have more funds to create the basic part of informatization. I do regret that. And you know, I don't think that now we have passed the step necessary to create some special unified platforms for healthcare. For the moment, they're not there. In my speech, I already said that I'm worried about, I'm concerned with different issues. Like, for example, do you know that death rate shortened twice as much in car accidents? Still, there are these 17,000, 18,000 lives are still there. First of all, because we stopped driving this wheeled coffins without the safety systems. And second, there was a special program which will allow medical brigade to come in this golden hour before everybody dies. I think these are the two moments which were the solution for the problem. It looks like it is not related with informatization, but it's not like that. The basic level, one of the problems which was referred to here, like dispatcher, like routing of the ambulances. There's not a problem of the doctors working in the ambulance, but that's a management issue. When there is a system management, there is informatization. Their informatization should be there in place, and we should get close to that. Probably the oncological people can excuse me. I don't quite believe that it doesn't matter how much money we invest. Where solving the demography problem is not the way we should move, actually. This is generally world tendency. We are no different from the others here. I consider the scales of growth in this schedules. It can influence the situation, definitely, but a specific person, this person, who are millions actually, only a system of big numbers will show where we can actually solve this problem by investing things, by investing money. Informatization of the first link, including the ambulance, is the step which should be done. If we create the platform, you know, I'm in favor of all the news in technology, and blockchain in 2010 was actively I was promoting that quite actively before I finally figured it out and stopped all the developments in this dimension. People are making money now, and I didn't want to do it, and I'm prohibited to do it by constitution. I'm in favor of new technologies and in favor of creating new platform, but it is definitely not healthcare. It is your ministry in the system of healthcare, education, social provision, etc. You have to create the core on which you can put like healthcare and social things, etc. Okay, just look. We found how to buy hardware. We know how to buy hardware. There are IT experts. The market is huge. I think the problem is informing the goals. My negative attitude to the Ministry of Telecommunications, I said it to all ministers. I said to the previous minister before he was removed from his position, like giving him a hint that he should move somehow because what ministry is doing is not good at all. Even today, speaking in front of you, I say create a platform which could be the core, the basis to put some social and educational things on that. That's the responsibility of people from that ministry, and I'm quite surprised. I opened a different law, another law where there are other money required for allocation to connect one system with other system in different ministry. I'm surprised. And where the Ministry of Telecommunications, well, when all these systems were created, why did not they invest this money there for creating these systems to synchronize it right now? And the worst thing is, do you think they should be allocated? Yes, I think it should be done. But these 300, 400 ministries, and you brought me 2 with money allocations. As for the others, as far as I understand, those who have lobbying opportunities, those came, and the rest of them come later. I don't want them to come later. I want the Ministry of Telecommunications to take these heavy, hard and dirty work to do it. And if it creates a platform, not for healthcare, because tomorrow it will have to be connected with social policy, I have them to make a more serious, more expanded platforms. And I am not against if the Ministry of Telecommunications is asking money, for example, for creating their own operating system, like mobile operating system. Kind of 105 billion were allocated for that. Indeed, it is needed, because we have lots of experts. You're absolutely right to say we do have many IT experts who will never participate in this project. We don't have this project. If we do it, make such a national project like that, then we can achieve the participants of our experts, and they will understand that this country is open for big projects. You can do great deeds, and they will stay here to live and work. That's what I call for Ministry of Telecommunications. Thank you so much. Thank you. Do you have any more questions? Yes, please. And mic to the speaker, please. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. My name is Klevashev Sergei Anatolievich. Mikhail Yurich has mentioned the residence of people of senior age. I'm one of them, as you might have heard. We have a question. Please, a question, because we're short of time. We're speaking about elderly people, and we discuss these topics. Now the question. First, I asked to myself, like 10 years ago, why do I need that? And I perfectly understand why we're doing that for the elderly people. It's clear to each and every one of us. And it's a really important story. In order to understand why do I need that personally, we recall the address of the president to the citizens of Russia and the structures like that, 1.7, 1.2. And apart from emotional and moral thing, we understand that we personally pay taxes. From emotion to taxes and to specific money we're paying, the question is to the World Bank. We have to change the mentality for that. How over 30 years ago the World Bank managed to cooperate with big countries, change this attitude that we, if not go through the whole path we pass it more rapidly. How these issues were solved 20, 30 years ago, when the whole system of the very France was really born. I have to say that the World Bank does not get involved in changing the mentality. These are the goals which are put by people. That's not true. I was part of a project of the World Bank in the end of the 90s. 90% of goals was changing the mentality. Just believe it. You can take it from me. This is solved by the institutes and organizations, and the society is getting matured to realize this kind of goals. Like 20 years ago, it was hard to even step up to them. And now the information environment and the motivation which people have, they are mature enough to have these goals in front of them. So it will succeed. And you know, I'm constantly getting surprised why I'm pulled, like I'm financial expert, economic expert. I'm always pulled either to the pension reform, or to medical one, or to I think the passport is. I open my passport and I have 60 weeks. I'll be 60 years old in three weeks, and I realize the reason why I'm involved in that. I think that's why the elder generation has to be carried about by the elder generation. Thank you. Dear colleagues, the time is out. I just wanted to make a little conclusion out of what we came up here with. The first situation, we all heartily support the orders of the president and the dimensions we have to develop. And the World Bank and our experts speak about the situation, that the goals are ambitious, that the system of healthcare, through the system of social policy, we cannot guarantee that we achieve the goals. Still, the goals are appointed, and we have to strive for them. As for the questions of national programs and national projects, it's quite clear that deriving from the goals, the projects are right, correct, and timely, and I think they're significantly situated by financial means. The question is whether we will be able to efficiently achieve that and perform that, whether we have the personnel, the people who will implement them in places. Are we ready for arrival of this money? Because tomorrow the money will be allocated and they will not be correctly spent because they were like painted from the side. Did we manage to monitor the existence? I quite often recall the joke. I'm not getting too deep into details. The essence of the joke is that whether the government is ready to delegate the goals to the subjects, and whether subjects will be responsible as government. If we do not share the risk between the subjects and the federal authority, probably will not get those results which we want. The second point, I think it will pop up, but Ekaterina Petrovna has to refer to it relatively. Now subjects are asking for money for construction. We know how to build. We know how to buy great equipment. The question is when we can dose, how much has to be built. In the world, we have a whole system when a certain definition of getting the certain licensing for new centers is agreed by federal authorities and regional authorities. And only in case if a region or business can justify why it builds a new hospital in this profile and it is agreed, then the money is allocated. We still say that the main thing in healthcare is to build. It is important, but it's insufficient. The second word, and the other words which we heard in different variants here, is the systematic approach in decision-making, it's continuity in decision-taking and monitoring. Without following these key issues, our activity will not be as efficient as we expect it to do. We'll spend the money, but efficiency will be quite low. And we have to understand that here we have financial experts, IT experts, medical experts, social policy experts. This is coordination of all the bodies of authority, which have to be coordinated, and it can be done only within the framework of a joint system, which I hope is being developed. Thank you indeed for participation, for your questions, and for interest to this session. Thank you.